A recent TV show that's come on new to Nickelodeon is a rebooted version of Alvin and the Chipmunks. This time it's a completely CGI animated feature. And thankfully, after the 3-time failure, that is that horrible Sorry Excuse, the live action movie, which gets everything about the Chipmunks wrong, except for the one thing that people hate, which they don't seem to understand why they should like it, the fact that they sing. We finally see in this new incarnation of the old series a whole bunch of things being gotten right. Alvin and the Chipmunks have always been singers. The fact that they sing other people's songs is what is part of the charm of what they do. Just like Yogi Bear always steals picnic baskets and Bullwinkle always tells bad puns. I can't stand it and don't understand it when people complain about a cartoon character in a movie being in character. But here's getting off the rant and back on track. What Alvin and the Chipmunks gets right is that they have the scale of the characters correct. During those 3 live action movies, someone's brilliant idea was to make the Chipmunks chipmunk-sized and have all of the gags in the movie revolve around the fact that the characters are small. That's not what the Chipmunks are about. The Chipmunks always have been and always should be characters who are about 3 feet tall. They are not the size of literal actual chipmunks. The chipmunk-sized characters work for Chip and Dale and Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, but it does not work for Alvin and the Chipmunks. Just as you would not take Chip and Dale from Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers and you would not make them 3-foot-tall characters, you should not make Alvin from Alvin and the Chipmunks a 3-inch tall character. It just doesn't work when you do it backwards like that. So thankfully the characters are back to their normal size. And here's a great bit of news for those of you who love nostalgic things, or a horrible piece of news for those of you who like good cartoons. Alvin and the Chipmunks is completely unchanged from what it used to be during the 1980s and 1960s. That's what the Chipmunks were back when they first got their start during the 60s and 70s, and what they were during their reboot during the 80s and 90s is what they still are. For all of those people who can't stand the fact that April O'Neil is a teenager and the Ninja Turtles are no longer what they used to be, and for all of those other people who can't stand that they took some other nostalgic 80s franchise and reimagined the characters to have them be different than what they were originally, Alvin and the Chipmunks is something that stays true to what the original series was. All of the characters have the same personality as they did in the original cartoon series, and all of the plots and story ideas and writing also has the same feeling as it did back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. It's almost as if those shows were still in the 80s and literally haven't changed a single thing about the way the stories are told, about the way the characters interact with each other. Every plot, every line, every step, every note that the characters do is exactly what would have happened in the 80s series or the original series. There's absolutely no twists, no turns, no surprises, no character development, no change in the character to make them different. And yes, that is possibly a good thing, because people love to complain that when they take a series and they make a few little changes to some characters, and suddenly the character isn't what they were originally, they get mad that changes were made to the character, and they feel that the series loses something by having those changes incorporated. When you change the origins of certain characters, fans get all upset. But there are other reboots that have done really good jobs, like Thundercats having the Thundercats not flee a dying planet, and having Snarf not talk, having Panthro not present for a huge chunk of the Thundercats reboot, and having him encountered later on in the story, and then giving him those robotic arms as a feature. Sometimes changing little things isn't disastrous, and it can lead to newer, richer, better worlds. Imagine where My Little Pony would be if it never changed anything and kept all of the characters identical to how they were in the previous generations, as opposed to taking those same characters and updating them, changing them, and fixing what was wrong with them to make them more deep and interesting. Yes, I can understand the issues with changing the familiar and altering what works into something that doesn't work, but at the same time I can appreciate coming up with a bold, fresh, new idea and taking a new approach to something more interesting. And with Alvin and the Chipmunks, they decided to change nothing and keep it exactly to the formula and the character personalities that we had in the 80s and earlier. But then there's a downside to doing this too, and that's the fact that Alvin will always be a egotistical jump to conclusions character. Simon will always be smart, and Theodore will always be naive, and the girls will always be female versions of the three brothers with identical personalities to the brothers so that they match them as romantic interests. When you have writing like this, now you've written yourself into a corner where the characters always have to be this way, and at the end of the day things have to return to status quo. You're not allowed to grow the characters and evolve them and make them something more interesting. Unlike what you see with shows like Gravity Falls or Adventure Time, where things are always changing and always staying fresh and interesting. Shows like Gravity Falls and Adventure Time and even My Little Pony, you can take a character from one season to the next and keep evolving them into something more complicated and more interesting with more to their personality. The formula that they're going with the new Alvin and the Chipmunks, they're basically playing it safe so that fans of the old series have nothing to complain about, and they feel like they're watching the show that they grew up on. And the writers can also basically take all the plots from the first two old series and recycle them with a slight new modernization to update it slightly. So that's it for the rants. Pro, this isn't the live action movie. Whatever your opinions are on the Alvin and the Chipmunks live action movie, toss them out, because this is a completely different continuity, a completely different world, and a completely different art choice. If you like the original 80s and earlier Alvin and the Chipmunks TV series and specials, then this is basically exactly the same thing, except in CGI instead of traditional 2D animation. If you're looking for the complexity and depth of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Legend of Korra, Gravity Falls, and to some lesser extent Star Versus, as well as other shows like My Little Pony and Adventure Time, then this isn't your bag. Furthermore, if you're the kind of person who just automatically hates everything CGI and only wants traditional 2D animation, I'll get off of that. It doesn't matter if it's 2D or CGI. Stories are good because of the writing and voice acting, not the medium of the art. I'd say this is more on par with Inspector Gadget 2.0. It's really like you stepped back into the 1980s and picked up where you left off, and everything is basically the same now as it was back then. No risks taken, but a decent amount of reward. Nothing done wrong, and a few things done right, but they're not taking any chances or trying to do anything spectacular either. That's just my impression on it based on a few episodes, and I'm not going to bother doing regular reviews of it, at least not until it does something spectacular. Anyhow, that's all I have to say on this subject for now. Thank you for watching, and good night.